Hi there, my name's Barnaby and I'm going through this book, Rhythm Guitar 365 by Troy Nelson, and I'm now 24 weeks into it. And every 8 weeks I do a kind of talking head video where I talk over my impressions, more for my own reference than anything else. I don't imagine anyone's actually really watching these. However, as I've mentioned before, every 4 weeks you have a block. So you get a block for 4 weeks and then the block changes after 4 weeks. And what happens within that block is you've got the same rhythmic ideas, same musical ideas for each day, but the key changes week by week. So on Monday you'll always have the same exercise, but one day it'll be in E major and the next it'll be in D major and next it'll be in A, each Monday or whatever. And so that makes the book very approachable. It's something I like very much about it. It means that the first week in every 4-week block is largely spent coming to grips with each idea. The second and third weeks you get them under your fingers, and the fourth week is usually really easy and straightforward, because even though the key is different and technically you've never played the exercises before, they still feel very familiar. So, starting out by talking about weeks 17 to 20, I found this quite straightforward. There are some really fun things they use, useful techniques like this sort of exercise is really good because it gets you to differentiate between a full stroke over 4 strings, a single pick, and then just 3 strings. So it really teaches pick control, which is fantastic. It also sometimes uses palm muting and sometimes doesn't, which is again all good technical stuff. So the Monday exercises for 17 to 20, fantastic. Tuesday exercises were again Travis picking, and I really like this. As I've said before, I'm not a fan of country music, but Travis picking is something that I found very useful. And you can do this either way. You can do if you want to, or you can do that kind of rhythmic alteration, dotted note thing if you want. He's got the triplet version, dum da dum, in this book, but it doesn't mean you have to do it that way. So it sounds more country if you do it that way, but if you do it straight, it sounds more folk or fingerpicking, straight ahead fingerpicking style. Wednesday's rhythm figures for 17 to 20, again, relatively straightforward. And this is actually a really useful thing which contains lots of these kind of Hendrix sounds, which are really cool. The only thing I found hard about this is I do these exercises at half speed and then at full speed. And at half speed, if you've got something like, whoops. If you're doing that slowly, and you do numerous repetitions of it, your hand does get very tired. But that's just good exercise, I think. But at full speed, it's not really an issue. The Thursday exercises, the funk ones, the funk exercises have always been great in this book, and this is really no exception. There's one tricky thing, which is that, let's say you're going from this to, you have to do this, and doing that in time, especially when you're doing it fast, is a real trick, and it's very much finger coordination, because for me, for example, my second finger tends to come down before my third finger. So this is a good exercise in finger coordination. So that's something I really appreciated having a chance to work on. Friday has been the reggae stuff, and that's been really good for these mute notes. So you get a chord like this, so you kind of, and that is just good technique and fun to do. Saturday has been jazz, and there are 2 things I want to talk about with these jazz exercises. One I'll talk about now, one I'll talk about a little bit later. The first thing I want to talk about is the technique asked for, and the second thing I want to talk about is the choice of chords. So the technique that is asked for involves a pick and fingers. So normally, if you've got a chord like this, you could play it with a pick, you could play it with your fingertips. This is how I would normally play it. But this asks you to play it like this. Pick, and it means you're using your little finger for all the time, which is unusual for me and was really quite painful when I first started. I'm getting a bit more used to it after 8 weeks of it, but again, it's still unfamiliar, and making sure that the top voice rings out cleanly is hard. Now, I understand the value of this technique because it means that you can do, say, spread chord voicings, something weird like that, and then if you want to have chords, if you want to have, a single line, then you can have the pick in your hand, so, or whatever weird jazz line you're going to play. It's a handy technique, and I do think I'm going to work on it and try and develop it. But it is alienating and a little tough on this poor little finger. And then the final rhythm exercise was really quite straightforward, this thing, which was great. Actually, it was in 3, wasn't it? Something like that. And that was good fun to do, just wrist loosening and nice at the end of the week. The end of the week exercises so far tend to be fairly straightforward. Now, if we go on to the next block and we start to look at, say, week 21, 22, 23 and 24, we've got a different set of exercises and a slightly different set of challenges. So the Monday exercises were these, okay, and these had to be done using a 3rd finger bar. And for many people, this is what they're familiar with, but I always use a 4th finger, and you just can't do that here. You have to, if you're gonna get that voice, suspension, right? And these are very good exercises because they force, again, pick control. If you go too far, you get unwanted noise. And then, of course, they have this component down here where you're playing, just playing on the bottom 2 strings as well. So that's really good. When you're doing it slowly, it really forces you to concentrate on your rhythm, which I needed to. And when you listen back to the videos, if you listen back to the videos, you'll hear that I do struggle with that. Again, the Travis picking thing, which is very, very useful. This time it's not dotted, which is nice for me, but you could play it dotted, I suppose, if you wanted to. It's all up to personal preference. Then you've got this kind of R&B Hendrixy thing, which is this. Now, there are 2 things going on here. You've got a motif where triplet, 1, 2, 3, 1. But then, as you go on, instead of it's, so that rhythmic difference is very subtle, but it actually brings the whole phrase to life. And I haven't listened back to my videos. There are probably a couple of times when I got that wrong. Don't tell anyone. Then the funk exercise this time was actually much simpler. There was no chunking, there were no silent notes, there was no, it was just, right? That was fine. But the one thing I did find is that the transition between this was really hard, because you're doing that at 104 BPM in semiquavers and going from here to there without it sounding messy or sloppy is really, really difficult. So that's great discipline, something I really appreciate. Friday, the reggae was the same thing. like that. Good fun, good rhythmic exercise. Excellent stuff. Saturday was jazz again, and again, it was this kind of fingers and pick thing. So, as I said, my little fingers working out endurance. And then the Sunday was this rhythmic figure, always ending on a chord. In this case, it ends on this G9. In other voicings, it ends on something like a different 9, right? This one here, a D9. But it's again a good solid exercise, just nice rhythm stuff, not too difficult, but the final chord could sometimes surprise you. Personally, I find a voicing like this, where you've got the root or one note here, finger behind it, finger in front of it, and this, getting that clean at speed is a little bit tricky. But all working very well, well planned, well thought out, and well grouped exercises. Now, I want to just go back and talk a bit about the jazz. And I said I wanted to talk about harmony here. And so I just want to go through and talk about how these exercises help your jazz understanding, or at least how I think they do. And that is that each bar has its primary chord, or sometimes two chords. So for example, if we look at week 19 Saturday, which is page 116, for those of you following along at home, you'll see our first chord is D major 7th, right? D major 7th. But we never actually see that chord. What we get are different voicings which allow for voice leading. So there's a melody here like this. And then we got right, finishing again on our tonic. Our melody begins on a D, starts on our tonic. I mean, we could play it like that, but that would sound kind of weird, and it's all an upper voicing thing. So the first chord we have here, in order to do this, we actually take a D major 7, but we have it in third inversion with the C sharp in the bass. And then we still retain our third inversion, but we add 9, right? So it's a D major 7 add 9. And then we go to a root version of the chord, which is this. That's just a straight D major 7. D major 7. And then we go here and we add an 11. Straight D major 7 root position, add 11, right? So that gives us very, very nice chord voicing, and all chords that fit within the D major 7 chord and allow us to retain our upper voice and of course our bass voice, which is again, right? So we get this against, right? Can I play those two together? With the chord voicings in between. So that's really clever. The next bar, we've got this, which is based around a B minor 7th, right? So we're in B minor 7, and here we get this chord, which is simply B minor 7 in first inversion with a D in the bass. The next chord adds an 11, that's B minor 7 plus 11, I think. Yeah, plus 11. And then we have this chord. Rather than do it up here, we do it down here. You could do it up here if you wanted to. The book allows either way, but this is what he's written. Just for ease, okay. And again, that's just a B minor 7th. But we've got an F sharp in the bass, so that means it's a second inversion. And then we simply go to this, which of course is a standard B minor 7 third inversion, right? minor 7. There's our third inversion, which has the 7th in the bass, C sharp. Okay, so, is that C sharp in the bass? That's not C sharp. Sorry, it has A in the bass. I apologise. That's A in the bass, so yeah, third inversion, the 7th chord. Okay, C sharp would be the 9th, of course. All right, then we go on to E minor 7. We've got 2 E minor 7ths, and the first E minor 7th we encounter is this, which is a first inversion, because it's got the third, or G, in the bass. And then we go to a second inversion, right, like that. And then we simply have A7, and this is nothing but an A7 in root position. And then we get our first inversion, which is here, which actually has a double third, right? We could add a bass into that, but instead we do it without. And then we finish on our D major 7th, again in third inversion, which is where we started. And so it's a really nice example of how you can use voice leading and extended voicings and different inversions to preserve an upper line and a lower line, and also how you can work with chords that are relatively close together on the neck. Now we see exactly the same thing when we look at Saturday of week 24. So let's have a look at Saturday week 24, which is page 142, rhythm figure 167. And we see the same thing. The first bar is G7, right? But what happens is we see this chord. This is a third inversion, right, with the 7th in the bass, which is F. And we've actually got a G13. So that's a G13. Then we add 9 to our G13. So this is a G13 and 9. And then we go to a standard G7. I mean, can't get more standard than that. G7, but then by pushing our voice up one more time, we get a G11. It sounds like a suspension, or we can consider it as a G11, right? And so our voice is and it's a really nice jazz progression, all within G. So that's a very useful exercise to go through. Then when we go to our F7, there's our F7, we start with F7 in first inversion, which would have to be this. This is kind of a difficult chord because we've got one finger way back behind. But yeah, F7 first inversion. Then we go to an F13 in second inversion. You can do it here. Sorry. There. Or if you wanted to, you could do it up here. And of course, this cries out for this moving the 13 there to resolve to an F7 second inversion. Alright, so this is the F13 second inversion resolving to an F7 second inversion on the second beat of this, on the third beat of this bar, and then of course finishing in the root. That's a standard F7 chord. The next bar is C7, and so it starts with standard root position C7. Then we get this third inversion with an 13 added, and then we get this. This is actually 13 and 9, 13 and 9, and then we get C7 13, and then we go to a standard C7, which is C7 simply in the second inversion, which means, of course, it has a G in the bass, right? And and then we finish on our G7. So if we play through that, you'll actually hear the chord voicing moving. When we start, and we only have 4 chords, we don't go outside those chords at all. Right? That's all G7. And now we're in F7. Now we move to C7. And then back to G7. So the jazz exercises, you can just play them and just kind of, do the finger work, or you can sit down and analyze them and get some really, really useful information about how to do chord transitions, how to manage voice leading, how to work with upper voice chords, drop 2 chords and that sort of stuff. And they can really help your harmonic understanding if you want to go that extra stage. And I think that's something about this book in general, is you can just work through the book as it is, or you can go through and spend some time asking why that chord voicing, why not this one, what are some alternatives, and it will teach you a lot about how to play efficiently and how to think about harmonic progressions, voice leading, all that sort of stuff. So you can use it just as finger exercises and rhythm exercises, or you can go through and do harmonic analysis. Personally, I tend to do a little bit of both, but then I'm a colossal nerd. Okay, I'll see you in another 8 weeks with any luck. Cheers.